Okay, hopefully that doesn't. All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Stephanie Lerner. I am with the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. I'm the director of grant making. I am joined by my colleague Rosa Doherty, who is our fabulous director of strategic communications, and she'll be helping out with things for this information session today. Um, this is the 2024-25 Creative Sector Flex Fund info session. Um, so we make sure you're all in the right place. Uh, just in case you're not familiar with the Cultural Alliance, we lead, strengthen, and amplify the voices of a cultural community that ignites creativity, inspires people, and is essential for a healthy region. And we do this through four key program areas, which are listed here. Um, we have a couple of things upcoming. So before I dive into the information about the Flex Fund, we just want to share a few things that have been going on with us. We have some workshops coming up, which are available um, thanks to a grant or sponsorship from PNC Arts Alive. There is you can register for them for free. We have a workshop two workshops on human resources and then workshops on public relations and marketing. So if you're interested in those, Rosa has already dropped the information in the chat. And we'd love to see you all there. They're coming up in a couple weeks. We also just released at the end of April the Arts, Culture, and Economic Prosperity report for Greater Philadelphia. This is done in conjunction with Americans for the Arts every 5 years and looks at the economic impact that the amazing arts and culture sector has on the region. And there are reports available for that, and you can get a custom report, and there's a lot of great information there. We also have some general Cultural Alliance membership information sessions coming up in June and July. If you want to hear more about what we're doing and what membership options are, please feel free to check those out. And so and I think Rosa can provide any additional information and links if needed. But without further ado, I'm going to talk about the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, as they are the state agency which funds many things, but including the Creative Sector Flex Fund. So their mission is to strengthen the cultural, educational, and economic vitality of Pennsylvania's communities through the arts. So they fund two grant programs that we at the Cultural Alliance administer locally. The first, just to share a little bit, is the Creative Entrepreneur Accelerator Program. And this is a grant of $2,000 to an individual who either has their own business or is looking at starting a business. And it provides a grant plus some business consultation services. This launched a couple of years ago, so not everyone might be familiar, but that's another great program that we have. We just finished up the spring round of accepting applications, but we should be able to offer it next year. And then the second grant program is the Creative Sector Flex Fund, which is what we are talking about today. So the Creative Sector Flex Fund, it is the second year we are able to offer it. This is the 24-25 round. It launched in the 23-24 round. It is a flexible grant of $5,000, and it replaced the program stream and entry to program stream or project stream grant funds that the Council on the Arts had. It's for art organizations or art programs of what they call non-arts organizations. And I'll go into the classifications and the definitions of those shortly. It is a one-year grant, and previously in the program stream and entry to program stream, there were, I think, maybe different grant cycles. They have adjusted this to be a 1-year grant that the grant period runs the calendar year. And so we have the application process starting roughly 6 months ahead of the grant period. Another shift from the previous grant programs is that all organizations must apply every year. There is no renewal application. It's the same application for everyone every year. So for this year, the 2024-25 timeline, applications have just opened a couple of days ago, and they'll be open until the end of July. So we want to give folks a lot of time to be able to work on their applications. We do encourage you to submit well before July 31st at 5 p.m. Please do not submit at 4:59 p.m. because the system automatically shuts it down, and we always get a few people at the last minute. And we'll try to work with you, but the system closes the grant portal automatically at 5:00 on the dot. Just to give a quick overview of the review process, the eligibility and panel reviews happen in August and September and kind of into November or into October, excuse me. We'll do award notification. We're hoping for it'll be sometime in November. And then the grant award agreements kind of paperwork award processing will be in December. And then the grant period is January to December 2025. So the organization classification, they're essentially, you apply under 2 classifications. The big, this is a slight change to the language from last year, but it's essentially the same buckets. The purpose of these classifications is really for what the requirements are, mostly around which financial documents you have to submit. So don't worry too much about it, but you do want to just make sure you're clicking the right one. So arts organizations are the nonprofit groups. You can be either an independent nonprofit or fiscally sponsored. Both things kind of fall into this arts organization category. They're the groups whose sole or primary work is the artwork, whatever it may be that you do. Arts programs of non-arts organizations are where you might have a department that does arts related activities within a larger institution. And so this could be a community service, a senior center. It could also be government, agencies. They would fall. So the sort of parks and recreation arts agencies fall under this arts programs of non-arts organizations. And I'm happy to answer, if you have a question, if you're not sure, please, let me know. Probably if you've applied for this in the past, it's the same as what it was before. I'm going to spend some time talking about eligibility, and then I'll go into the criteria and the actual application questions, as well as the process in Submittable. So to be eligible, you must be a nonprofit, and that does include either independent 501c3 or a fiscally sponsored, or you are a unit of local government. You must be located in Pennsylvania. You must be registered to operate, and you must have a history of at least 2 years of consistent arts programming in Pennsylvania. The budget eligibility is a very particular one. You must have an average annual revenue between 10,000 and 200,000, and that is determined by a 2-year average um, of your most recently completed fiscal years. So if you run June to July or July to June as your fiscal year, you'd actually be using the year prior and then the one before that, depending on the timing of your fiscal year, as well as if you have submitted, if your 990 is done or not. And I know that a lot of times they're not done yet. A lot of organizations, file extensions. That's fine if it's not done. You'd have to use the one before that. If it is done, though, you can use them. It has to be the most recently completed one. That also means for organizations who don't have 990s and you're using your financial statements, it does have to be a completed fiscal year, so not your current active fiscal year. Okay. And just actually as a note, if your budget is over 200,000, and you're thinking, well, shoot, I'm not eligible for this, there is another funding stream that the Council on the Arts has. It's called AOAP, and there's an entry to AOAP for those who haven't received it before. And that is for organizations whose budgets are over 200,000, and the Council on the Arts runs that directly. So just as a PSA announcement, and tell your friends, that's another funding stream available from the state. I'm going to pause there. Any questions? Anything? We're looking good.
I see a question or a hand raised from Deb.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Deb, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I'm just curious, when you talk about revenues, Stephanie, it's just revenue from ticket sales and concessions, just the revenue from the theater activities, or does it include contributions from patrons and members and dues and things like that?
It can include contributions, grants, etc. The only thing that isn't included is in-kind contributions. But grants make up a good chunk of revenue for a lot of arts organizations. So those are absolutely considered.
I have I'm sorry. I have two other questions. Is this an online process or a hard copy process?
This is an online process.
And if we do a project, since we're a calendar year, I'm going to assume that our 2022 and 2023 are the fiscal years you're looking at. If we do a project this year that we want to do in September or August, could the funds be used to reimburse our cash for those projects?
That's a good question, actually. No, so the grant is a flexible general operating grant, but it is intended for the funds to be used during the grant period itself.
Okay, so it would be used in 2025.
Yep, it would be used in 2025. Yep.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And I see a question in the chat here, the last line. Individuals and LLCs with fewer than 2 organizers/members are not eligible to apply. Oh, I just lost the question here. Let me scroll up here. Does fiscal sponsorship change this? I don't believe so. So you have to have 2 people kind of listed on the LLC in order for it to be eligible. If there's a very specific question, we can kind of take it, I can cover it over email. And we can also, if there's anything ever I'm not sure about, I do communicate with the Council on the Arts, and we double check kind of with them, as they are the ones setting they set the criteria and guidelines for these programs. So we always want to make sure, we're following everything. If there's a specific question, if you have sort of specific questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them. And if not, I can go over something over email. But I'm going to keep going. I just want to generally cover what the review process looks like. The first round of review, after all of the applications are submitted, we do what we call an eligibility review. And that is really to just make sure all the boxes are checked, all of the, the details are covered, that you do in fact meet all of the eligibility criteria, that all materials are submitted properly, et cetera. And this happens kind of, and then from there, those organizations who are considered eligible get moved forward into a community panel review process. We have community members serve as panelists, and they review the application for the sort of the content. So the eligibility review is really the technical review around, does your budget fall in the right range, et cetera. And the community panel is scoring the application questions and the narrative. We have multiple people, multiple panelists will review each application, and then we average everything out and take all of that information to a grants committee of the board, of the Cultural Alliances board, and they give the sort of final stamp of approval that this list, based on the community panel review, and the whole process looks good. And that's how we end up with the list of who gets funded ultimately. That is a slight change, actually, just for history context. In previous iterations of the program stream, et cetera, the Council on the Arts would actually approve the final list themselves. They shifted that for the Flex Fund because they wanted to put more of the decision making locally. And so now we have this process with the panel reviews going to the grants committee. So I see a few more questions about eligibility. 2023 was the first year incorporated as a C3 and the first and only year for which there's a 990. That's funny. I've actually just got that question from another organization. So that's great to see all this work, new work happening. I'm bringing that question actually back to the council to confirm. I believe the answer is you have to have 2 years of programming as a nonprofit, which means you would have to wait. But we are going to confirm that. And then for the financial information, yes, the reports from Data Arts can be used as your financial reports for those who do use Data Arts and don't have 990s. And then the financial statements can also be internally generated. They are supposed to be board approved. So if you're a fiscally sponsored agency and you're under 100,000, actually the 100,000, that does not make a difference. It's if you only submit a postcard 990, which is under 50,000, or you're fiscally sponsored, which you could be fiscally sponsored under for any amount. But yes, you can use internally generated financial statements. And then there was just in terms of the 400,000 that was distributed in 2023, that was just through the Cultural Alliance. So we made 80 grants of 5,000 each for 400,000 total. That was just our region. I do not know the number that was statewide, but it was much larger. We do get the largest portion of the Flex Fund dollars that get distributed throughout the state, since we are the largest, population-wise, we're the largest region. But other regions made grants as well. Okay. I am going to I'm going to have to, Lewis, I'll answer your question, I think, offline, because I'll need to double check how that should be. But I'm going to move forward, going into the application criteria. These are the same as they were last year, which was the first time these got rolled out. I do just want to note that the criteria changed fairly significantly when the Creative Sector Flex Fund launched last year. It also changed for the other related programs like AOAP. So they actually use the same criteria. And the thinking behind the changes were to align, the council wanted to align their grant criteria with their strategic plan, which I don't know exactly when that rolled out, but they basically rolled out a new strategic plan with priorities and then have been kind of aligning the programming to that. So there are 3 criteria areas. They're called values. And then within each of these 3 areas, there are questions. So the first one is community value. So there's 3 values statements within that and 3 related questions. There's a total of 8 narrative questions overall. When you read these, I encourage people to look at them, kind of the value statement, which is the criteria, and the question kind of together. For the most part, they really mirror each other and they're similar, but in a few instances, there's multiple concepts present. And so you'll want to be making sure you address all of those things. So the first is artistic offerings that strengthen its community culturally, educationally, and/or economically. And so then the related question is, over the past year, how did your artistic offerings or services support your community culturally, educationally, or economically? And it is and/or. So a lot of folks try to speak to all 3. That's not necessarily required, but speak to kind of how they work for you. The second is artists and artistic offerings and/or services involve and are meaningful to the community being served. And then the related question is, over the past year, describe how artistic decisions were made and by whom. How did you know your artistic products and/or services were meaningful to your community? So this is one of the examples of where the criteria and the question are just have a kind of few things going on embedded within it. And so I encourage you to kind of look at this whole thing as you're answering them. And they will show up, I have them all in the application, and we'll also be sharing these slides so that you can look at everything all together. And the last area for community value is relevant arts learning opportunities and creative endeavors for community members. Over the past year, describe how you defined and determined the impact of your learning initiatives within your community. So those are the 3 criteria and questions for the community value section. The second section is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then this one, there are 2 criteria and questions. And the first is, apart from being audience members or beneficiaries, community members are central to the design of the applicant's work. And then the related question is, describe your community's involvement in the design of your work and its feedback related to your work. The second criteria is plans and action-oriented practices towards diversity, equity, inclusion, and access in ways that are relevant to the community, including efforts to reach new audiences. Over the past year, describe your organization's plans and work to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and/or access. How did you know that that plans and actions were relevant to your community? We did get a lot of feedback and questions regarding these two areas. What I can say is these are very complex and complicated topics. Our understanding is that the goal of this value and these questions are to really prompt and not only thinking, but to help organizations articulate what you're already doing, as well as prompt you to think about what ways and areas of diversity, equity, inclusion that you maybe haven't been thinking about. So for example, you might be an organization whose mission is very specifically focused on a certain population. And so in that instance, diversity, equity, and inclusion might look different. So you might actually be thinking more about how do you incorporate more ways to serve people who are neurodivergent or have, sort of disability access issues, or LGBTQ populations. So really the sort of areas you could be thinking about could range from racial diversity to age or gender, disability access, financial ability, or many others. So there's a lot of ways to interpret this. This is kind of what is sort of evolving to understand these value and criteria. And we hope I hope that helps a little bit. So the third and final value area is stewardship. There are 3 questions and criteria in this area. Planning processes are appropriate to the organization's mission and goals. And then the related question, describe your most recently completed planning process, including who was involved, describe the key findings and goals that followed the planning process, and how you track and measure progress. So there are a number of different topics even within just that question. The second is capacity to carry out programs and projects as planned. Over the past year, how did you ensure that you were able to carry about your programs or projects? To what degree were you able to carry out programs as planned? And then the last is appropriate financial planning and oversight practices. Describe your financial planning and oversight practices, including who participates in and is accountable for financial management and organizational oversight. Describe the financial condition of your organization and key actions taken to ensure adequate resources are available to carry out your mission or arts program. So those are the 3, let's see, just click back here. Those are the 3 criteria. There are 8 questions. There are 8 criteria within these 3 values and 8 questions. And that is the bulk of the narrative for this application. There are some required materials. These are the same as they have been in the past, at least the same as the Flex Fund was last year. You will need your IRS determination letter. If you're fiscally sponsored, that is your fiscal sponsors. And then you'll also need your agreement and memorandum of understanding. You'll need the 2 years of completed financial information. And these must be, if you're an arts organization and regular 501c3, it should be your 990s. If you're an arts program, it's your board or committee approved kind of arts specific program or department financial statements. If you are a if you are an arts organization who is under 50,000 budget, and which means you could submit what is called a postcard 990, which is just an abbreviated form that doesn't actually show the financials. Actually, most organizations that submit the regular 990 N or EZ, but if you do submit a postcard 990, you also need to submit the financial statements so that we can actually see the revenue information. And then, as I mentioned, you if you're fiscally sponsored, we also need the agreement document. And if you're an LLC, you must include the certificate of organization. And then, excuse me. And then the last thing is a list of activities, which is a one-page. Really, you can do anything you want with this one page. It just sort of show what kind of programming, how many programs. Some people kind of just have a big list. Some people put some pictures on it. You know, really whatever you'd like to do. We also and you're optional. You have an additional option to submit up to 3 links that could take you to content. It could be your social media, could be kind of links to specific recordings of performances. That's optional, although we do, you know, encourage that. Feedback I heard from the panelists was that some of them would Google the organization to try to just learn a little bit more and see some examples. So I've provided space for different links in the application to do that as well. So I see a question here about focusing on programs for children. The Council on the Arts, it's funny, I don't know that I would say just focuses on adult programs, but by all means, yes, include information on programs for children. This is the arts across the board, any age. The one thing to note is there is a different funding stream for schools. So if you are a nonprofit and you run arts education, you know, program, if you run programming for kids, or I shouldn't say for children, you are eligible. You can absolutely apply to the Flex Fund. If you are a school, you are not eligible for the Flex Fund, and there's a different funding stream for you. So how to apply? The application form is live on our website. It's on our submittable website. So there's a link from our website, and we'll send it out. And so you can, you know, pull it up. I know that some folks have already started, but when you get to our submittable page, this is what it will look like. You can click in submit to get into the application. It will prompt you to associate your application with an organization. So please do that. It is helpful on the back end for us, to manage the information. If you're fiscally sponsored, this is your fiscal sponsors EIN. So, you know, that part you can skip if you don't have that. But if possible, please do this so we can associate your account and application with the organization. We've also enabled collaboration. So when you go into the application, on the top right, there'll be a link that says manage collaborators. So if you want to invite another person to access the application, that is available as a function. We haven't used it a lot, so I don't know how much help I will be in troubleshooting any issues, but submittable, there's also submittables, tech support if needed, but that's an option. But when you get to the application page, it is all one big page. So you're just kind of scrolling through everything. There's no sort of multiple pages. At the very, very bottom, you have an option to save draft or submit. You can save the draft and come back to it and edit it. Once you submit, you cannot edit it. So just flagging that that is kind of how the functioning works in Submittable. Some general tips and some feedback that we've gotten. Please be as detailed and specific as possible. Please write the narrative as if the reader has not heard of your organization or is not familiar with that type of work. The community panelists come from all different backgrounds. Many, with deep familiarity with, in the arts, but not everyone is familiar with all types of arts and culture work across the region. So please kind of keep that in mind as you're writing. Please double check all materials before submitting. One tip, actually, as you're going through the application, please make sure you select your organizational classification. That will adjust which financial questions show up for you. So if you select arts org, you'll be asked for the 990s. If you select and then select fiscally sponsored, you'll be asked for the specific things related to being fiscally sponsored. So please check those or click those, so that way you know which questions you're responding to. And then just please do, if you're submitting financial statements, they can be submitted in any format. Just please make sure they fit on pages when you PDF them, and the columns don't cross multiple pages, so that I'm scrolling to try to get everything to line up and figure out where the numbers are. So just please, that's greatly appreciated, because we do manually check all of the financial statements. And then just some reminders as we're wrapping up here. The application window closes on July 31st at 5 p.m. and Submittable system will shut it off automatically. So you will not be able to submit after that moment, to the nanosecond, and you cannot edit your applications once the window closes, as well as once you have submitted the application. I'm going to click back to the timeline just to show it again and see if there are any questions. So here is the timeline. And so yeah, any questions? I see one here in the question: should applicants submit hard copies of the application contents? No, it has to be submitted through Submittable. We do use this Submittable as our grants management system, and we want to reduce the amount of paper. We have several filing cabinets worth of paper copies of things from previous years that we're still holding on to. So we want to keep paper to a minimum. Any other questions about the process, the application, the timeline, etc.?
Oh, I just submitted one via chat.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So there's a question about if you also have program in New Jersey. Should we include a statement attesting that no funds awarded by the Commonwealth will be used for the activity outside of the PA work? That's a great question. I will actually need to check with the council on if there are any requirements related to that and how that would work. How many applicants were there last year? There were 164 applications last year. Some of them, didn't move forward into the panel review process. But yeah, it was 160 something at the beginning, and then 100 and oh my gosh, I'm blanking. It was like 140 something, 130 something that went through the panel review process. So it was about half to that were funded. We obviously wish there was more funding available to fund many more. We also encourage, people or organizations from across the southeastern PA because we want to have funding go to all areas. Yeah, that's, we do wish we had more funding, because there's certainly the amount of need for these small, a medium small, grants is certainly yeah, we would fund lots more if we could. And I will add, the Council on the Arts is, we try to be as flexible as possible with the application process and the review and the eligibility. The council, does want there to be, we have to be very kind of rigid with the adherence to the guidelines and the criteria and the eligibility criteria. So please make sure, the financial documents, everything is correct. If you submitted, we had one last year who submitted their current year and the previous years. And since it was not a completed financial year, we could not consider it eligible. And that is how the sort of review process works. So if a document isn't correct, if someone submitted the request letter to the IRS instead of their actual IRS determination letter, and we couldn't count that. So please just kind of double check all of the materials and information ahead of time. We really want there to be, we want everyone to move forward into the panel review process. We don't want people to be kind of considered ineligible because of a paperwork mistake. And yes, we will be sharing the slides as well as the recording after this session. And there's also, I didn't mention this, there's also a copy of the application, the sort of questions and language of this specific application, the whole application. There is a copy of that on our on the web page that Rosa just linked. So that way you can look at all of the questions, save it in a Word document and complete it, and then go in and to Submittable and paste all your answers in. Any other questions? Thank you. Yeah, we do want people to apply. We want this funding to get out there. Hopefully, thank you. And then if you have other questions, feel free to email me. Either the grants email or grants@ will get to me, as well as my regular email. I didn't put Rosa's email up, but then if you have questions about membership or the prosperity report, we've got some emails up as well. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Stop share. Answers are generally at 400 words, for each question. And if it is not ineligible, yes, if your application last year was not eligible because of an error, or even because of, say, budget, you can resubmit. The sort of eligibility designation only applies to that one application round. So maybe you end up being within the budget this round, and so you can reapply and we can recheck. And if you weren't eligible because of a paperwork, error, yes, absolutely, please resubmit. That's what we will, yeah. And then hopefully we can make sure there are no paperwork errors for anyone, and folks can, go through be part of the panel review process. And you are, yeah, welcome. Yeah, I can keep hanging out. I feel like there's always a few questions that people have at the end, although I am going to stop recording. So thank you all for coming. Please keep asking questions if needed. Panelists, that's a great question. Panelists, we do a call for community panelists. That'll happen this summer. And gosh, last year we received over 100 interest forms for 24-25 panel slots. So it's almost like a little application process in and of itself to select community panelists, but we make sure there's representation, well, in many different ways, but we really make sure there's people who are from all of the different counties. So, and there are, you either have to live or work in the southeastern PA region to qualify as a panelist. So you can't live in, Idaho, and be a panelist. You have to, be in the community. And the panelists are paid a stipend of $250 to serve, and to do these reviews. And it is a lot of reading. I just finished being a panelist for the entry to AOAP grants, and it's the same application question. So I just went through the process, and it is, yeah, you review like 25 applications a piece, and so it is a lot of reading, but it's a great process. And yes, we'll be doing a call for panelists over the summer.